Nora, Melissa, hi. And those in the room, want to call the meeting to order. And also, the meeting is being live streaming. Yeah. Okay. Next, land acknowledgement. Okay, thank you. Can we, please, Nora, Melissa?
We'll do the land. We'll start with the land acknowledgements. So we acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives. Miigwech.
Thank you, Michelle. And the next item is a review of the agenda. Approval. Can we have someone to? The discussion will be open after we have someone who move and second.
Sorry, before we move, I've requested an amendment and I asked for time 10 days ago and then sent an email. So it seems that the agenda is missing our customary slot sought for working group updates. It is unprecedented not to have a customary spot for working group updates, and we have two groups, Effective Practices Working Group and the Special Education Plan Working Group, that have done an enormous amount of work all year, and in particular the last month, that would like to give a brief update to SEAC about all of their work. I think it's very disrespectful and unprecedented not to hear a summary of all of the work people have been doing for hours and hours outside of the SEAC meeting. So I'd like to make an amendment to add back the customary working group update slot into our agenda, especially since it's the last meeting of the year and we often haven't heard from them.
The thing that is, I respectfully disagree with what my colleague Melissa just said, that, judging that is disrespectful. I've been around for 12 years, and we have been, setting up, designing the agenda depending on what we want to discuss. And if a member want to make any suggestion, I would suggest that, not to make a judgment. I mean, that is only, doing things by the code of conduct, TDSB code of conduct. That's we need to follow.
So I'm not making any judgment at all. Excuse me, sorry.
I didn't give you a floor, please. I didn't recognize you. I don't know why you're talking. That is also the Robert rule. I'm sorry.
So how do I indicate that I would like to speak?
We have, did anyone want to say anything before we move? What we have here is the review and approval of the agenda. Does anyone has anything to?
Well, I'm making a motion to amend the draft agenda.
I'm sorry, Melissa.
I think if a motion is made, it has to be heard.
The motion's on the floor. It needs do we need a seconder for SEAC?
Through you, Chair.
Who want to talk, please?
It's Steve from Epilepsy Toronto.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Steve, you're muted.
Sorry, yes, I move to approve the agenda as is so we can continue with the meeting. as per the existing agenda.
Richard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a very quick question. Is the working group updates to be a standard ongoing item on the agenda that will be on every agenda? And if so, what caused it to be removed from tonight's agenda might be the question. If it is going to be a regular monthly feature, it is not on tonight's. Is there any further details as to why it's not on the agenda? Maybe that would help everybody. Thank you.
And we have someone who moved, to approve the agenda. Do we have a seconder? After that, we go into discussions, and through the discussion, we can go back and amend it.
Sorry, but there was an amendment to agenda. I believe that's what,
I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you.
this is Isabella LC4 speaking, and I'm sorry, I'm finding that this whole behavior a little inappropriate. We're all adults, and I think that whatever issue people have, personal issues, they should not be, exposed to the outside. And I that there was a motion put on the table to add an item to an agenda. And I can't believe that another member just moved the agenda as is. I mean, we have to take turns and deal with items as they are raised by members. Isn't that true?
We need the agenda on the floor before an amendment is proposed.
Yes, we need the
So
agenda.
I'm going to clarify. We need the agenda on the floor before an amendment can be added to it. So somebody has to put the agenda on the floor for discussion and amendment, and possible amendment.
Okay.
So Steve has moved the agenda onto the floor. Sorry, you'll have to remind, does this committee need a seconder? We need a seconder to put the agenda on the floor.
I'm happy to be the seconder.
Seconded.
Thank you. So now we
Discussion.
can have discussion of the agenda.
And I think that's what I was saying. That's how the Robert's rule works. Yes, Richard, we can go back.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair. So if we could clarify for the committee, if the working group updates are a standing item on the monthly agenda, or if they're only added on per request, which I understand, I believe is what I'm hearing as the case, is that they're only added on when there is a request. Otherwise, the working groups do not give an update. Somebody could clarify? Thanks.
I think that is, as the way that we have been doing things is that depending on the items that we have, for the meeting, we reorganize the 2 hours meeting, to discuss these items. And you can see that, the special education working group or subcommittee will be speaking tonight, and the budget working group will be speaking, and even when in the past, even when we had all these subcommittee or working groups, on there, we would always ask if there's any working group has update. And now, before going through the process of setting the agenda, there are 2 working groups that will be speaking tonight. The special education, special education plan working group and the budget working group. Anyone I see a hand there. Leanne, can you tell me who has a hand? Is it Steve?
Through you, Chair. Is it that working groups will be updated as needed and a couple at a time, so that we're not wasting time if there's nothing to say, and we're giving time as needed?
Thank you, Steve. I think that is, that's exactly what I just said, to Richard, and that tonight we have two working groups that will have, something to say. Yes, Melissa?
Thank you.
So in answer to Richard's question, it was my understanding, and we could probably go back through years of agendas, but it was my understanding that there's a standard standing item for working group items every month. And working groups that don't have anything to report, don't report. So in that vein, on that assumption, I actually wrote to the chair and vice chair 10 days ago saying that these two working groups, special education plan and effective practices, have a little extra material this month because they've been working very hard. So could you please allocate slightly more time for them? So I assumed that they were on. I was just trying to help you manage time. The response that I got back, my understanding was you were saying, we're not giving you a lot of time, but I still thought that they're a standing item. So what I'd like to say is we probably have close to 24 members of SEAC who sit or have sat on various working groups at various times. Some are active more or less at various times. But I think it's very, first of all, disrespectful to the participants not to let them summarize in 5 minutes when they've spent hours and hours of work between every SEAC meeting on behalf of the group. But I think it's also very disrespectful to SEAC not to hear what their colleagues have been working on and are bringing back a summary so that our colleagues can be well informed. So on that note, I'm asking that we adhere to what I thought was a standing practice, that there always be an opportunity for working groups to give an update. And if you'd like to make a change to that in the future, I think we should discuss it as a group, not just make a unilateral change. One other thing I would just note is I think at this point, we've probably spent more time discussing this than at least one or possibly both of those groups actually needed for their update. So I'd invite you to consider the change, please.
I think that is, we need to get into the meat of the meeting. Because, to respond to what you just said, when we agree on the process, I will please ask all the members, to respect the process. And Melissa, as she just said, she reached out to us after we have set, we set the agenda already, and the response was clear. I'm not getting, it's not a back and forth. The response was clear that we already had the meeting, but the commitment that was made for the SEP-RC, for the special education plan working group is on the agenda. And that's what I've said. And everyone knows that, as I said, I've been sitting in this room for the last 12 years. And I went to, things that I even told people, this is what I was oriented with. My handbook, I don't know if you see it. I think that is 12 years ago. I think, there are a few people who were who are still here, who were already here on SEAC. And I think that is, now we moved, the agenda is on the floor. Let us see if there's anything that needs to be done to amend it. If it's, Richard, is it about?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note, I understand the process too requires that the SEAC liaison be copied on all correspondence that's active amongst this committee, and I don't know if that was done in the case of the request. So maybe it is procedural that it cannot be changed at this point because the request didn't cover all the people that should have been on the distribution list. So Leanne should always be copied on all communications to the chair and co-chair, as I understand it, as a part of the procedure. Thank you.
Yes, Nora?
So sorry. So sorry. I saw there's a hand. I'm not sure if chair and co-chairs and Ian are monitoring this. I saw Rowan had her hand up for quite some time. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you. I will just be brief. I just want us to go in a positive way, and I've just felt very uncomfortable, to be honest, just with everything. And I think possibly over the summer, is there any possibility the TDSB and the chair can work together to get a mediator in? Or I don't know what's involved, but I just think we want to work next year in a better way. And this is really unhealthy and uncomfortable. And I want to stay and I want others on here to be feeling like we're doing a lot of good, but I would really like this to be looked at as an issue that needs to seriously be addressed for September, but outside of all of us. Like someone needs to come in here and sit down, take everyone's point of views and walk away and reflect on how we're going to work better going forward. Because this going round and round is just really toxic and uncomfortable. And I'm sorry, that's all I'm going to say. I'm not taking sides with anyone, but I just think moving forward, whenever you have a problem, you need to get someone outside to come in and to mediate. And that's my opinion and thoughts. And I'm not going to say anything more. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora?
I'm not sure that it will resolve tonight, but in Bronwyn's spirit, I think maybe in September, if there's an opportunity for our first meeting, we used to try and sometimes get together early, so we had an organized sort of conversation about, what can we expect in our agenda and how we're going to move forward, because I keep thinking in my head, I don't even know my colleagues really on the committee, because we started in a pandemic, and it's lovely that SEAC's convenient about being in person and not, but it would be nice for us to have sort of an orientation, to know what to expect, and start September on that kind of footing. So I hear what Bronwyn's saying, and I would second some sort of plan in the fall for that.
Okay, thank you. Let us, and if we already spent almost half an hour, without doing anything from what we were supposed to do. And I don't think it will be respectful, to anyone here, and getting into, when closer to 9 and saying that we will extend the meeting. We have, if there's anything, we have the agenda on the floor. Can any specific amendment that, someone want to make here? So, sorry. Yes, David, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I don't know if I'm audible. Am I audible?
You're audible, David.
Oh, great, thanks. I just want to echo the two sentiments. The first is, on any committee I'm on, the chair is the person who puts together an agenda trying to balance our competing needs and figure out the best way to use time. And if somebody wants to raise something that's not on the agenda because there just wasn't time, we deal with it in under other business. But I also want to echo the frustration that many are feeling that we are not making effective use of our time. There are kids with disabilities facing and other special ed needs facing significant barriers at TDSB. I think what would be very useful is for us to set a few priorities per meeting, maybe 3 or 4, and make sure we have time to go into them, not have standing items that may or may not need to be addressed, but our time is limited. I'd like to see it efficiently used, and I share the frustration that others are expressing. Back to the chair.
Thank you, David. Does anyone has, a suggested amendment to the agenda on the floor? We have an agenda that was on the floor. Is there anything that needs to be amended, to move forward? Yes, Melissa.
So thank you. I'm not sure if I understand. Is this an appropriate time for me to request an amendment to have an update from the 2 working groups that I mentioned? And I should mention, I think each of their updates are 5 minutes or less. But they have done quite a bit of work and would like to share it, especially before we break for the summer.
Is it possible, Melissa, when the special education, plan working group will be at, item 4, to include what you want to say in addition to from the special education working group?
Well, we certainly could if we finish the overdue motion from last month. I would just also add, I'm not providing either of those updates. One of them is from Richard and the other is from Kirsten. So they've both told me that they'll be very brief, but there's important business to pass on.
Because I think that is, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at the action log. Because when you said about the motion, you will see some of the action item that will be covered, from that motion here. It's some of the questions, specific questions that we expect, from staff and so on here. I don't know if you have the chance to take a look.
I'm sorry, what are you talking
Yeah,
about?
my suggestion would be that if, when we go through the action log, if there's anything missing, we'll see how from the special education, you said that you want some to build on, the motion that we presented to the FBEC, right?
No, thank you for trying that. It's quite simple. These groups have probably put in at least 20 hours over the last month, and they just want to summarize for 5 minutes what they've been working on so the rest of SEAC knows and can take away those thoughts to build on for next year. It's just a working group
What
update.
I'm asking-
We can,
What I'm
they can
asking-
work in wherever you want, but
What I was asking, can that be built into the item that the special education plan working group will be presenting? Is that okay?
sure, but
Okay. If it's okay, thank you very much. We'll find somehow we can make sure that you have it built there, right?
okay, sure, I'll try whatever you want. I'm just going to note, now we have 3 items, I think, worked into time allocated for one, but of course, people will try to go very fast because we all want to go quickly.
Yes. Order business. Yes, and yes, we put it here, the second one, order business.
Other business?
Yes. And the effective, working group, if we put that under order business, is that okay? We're trying to make sure that, we get there.
Sure, we can do whatever you're suggesting. I would just note that usually these items have been put to the very end of every agenda, and usually we run out of time, and they don't have enough time.
No, I think
So
that's, let us
we
try.
can do
Even
whatever
though
you
we
want.
already
should-
waste a lot of time, let us try to make sure that we'll cover it before we go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir. Is there any amendment that, that you want to make to the agenda? Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry that, we may not have the same people speaking more than twice for each of these items in terms of, managing the time that we have, to end the meeting. I hope it's okay with everyone, that you don't say that, I see no objection. That means for each item, it's only twice, for anyone. Thank you.
Vote on the amended agenda?
And yes, you're moving the amended agenda, Melissa?
No, just a point of clarification.
Yeah?
We don't have to talk about it now, but I think I hear you saying that you want to limit how much people can say in a meeting. So this is the first we've heard of this new, perhaps, rule. So if this is the kind of thing that we want to amend our SEAC practices for, I would suggest let's take these ideas into an offline working group discussion and work out some good recommendations and bring them back to the full group, which is how the working groups actually work.
Sorry, I didn't get you. You said that, sorry, I didn't get you the solution that you.
I think it's just a miscommunication. I think Tim, in interest of time, we need to take a vote on the amended
Yeah.
agenda and move on.
Is anyone moving? I thought Melissa was moving for the approval of the amended agenda.
Through you, Chair, it's Steve. I move to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you, Steve. Second?
I'm going to second. This is Amy.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay, thanks, everyone. As I said, that is, it's just, I'm not changing the practice. I'm just agreeing, with you for tonight that we have only two for each item to, take turn only twice. Another declaration of positive profit on interest. Does anyone have any conflict of interest? I see none. Now, the approval of the minute from April and May meetings. Yes.
Sorry, I have a question. So Leanne just sent out, I think, revised April minutes earlier today, which I haven't had a chance to go through. I just have a question for Leanne. Do those incorporate the changes that I had previously sent?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I can move to approve then.
The April, thank you.
Yeah.
And a seconder for April?
Oh, yes. So my question to Leanne was if she incorporated all of my changes for April.
Yes, she's already. And a seconder for the April minute?
Oh,
Nora? Thank you, Nora. Okay. Anyone oppose the approval of the April minute? I see none. Thank you very much. And the May minute? The May minute. Thank you, Melissa. Anyone is second? I saw Richard. Okay. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard. Anyone opposing the approval of the May minutes? I see none. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. We just do that. You probably usually, if for the interest of time, the action log, I would suggest that if there's anything, I see that staff had some follow-up there, and if staff can, please, take a closer look and share any update with us. And those who have some updates, you can please, share that with us through Leanne. You send everything to Leanne. And can we expect, have a kind of a timing with staff here to say that maybe within a week, we can hear from staff through Leanne for the updates that we have here for you?
Yes, sure, not a problem. A lot of these items are actually completed that are on here for staff, but we will send it to Leanne.
Yes, please. Please take a closer look because I'm sure that there are some there that maybe hidden that you didn't have, you have the chance yet to see. And the same thing for everyone. And thank you for allowing us to do that, the action log update that way. And do we have Elizabeth here already?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. It's the floor is for you, Elizabeth. If you can, magically package everything in 20 minutes, it will be I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm sorry
no problem.
for
So
putting the
I'm
pressure
back
on you.
with, I'm back with Tana Turner as well. Leanne has a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to get her to share the screen. And as she's doing so, I'll begin to talk. Within 20 minutes, we want to be able to hear from you. As part of your agenda, you already have the 5 pillars for which we are going to be seeking your input. So as Leanne puts up the agenda, just to let you know that we're going to review the 5 pillars in the multi-year strategic plan as a follow-up to part 2 from when you were here the first time, asking you if there are any priorities that are missing or any considerations that we need to include as we think about the renewal of the multi-year strategic plan. Just as a reminder that this is an engagement, so we have some rules for engagement. So no guilt or blame. That is, we all have different viewpoints, so let's leave space for us to engage in those viewpoints. Everyone's perspective is equally valuable, so we're looking forward to hearing a variety and diversity of perspectives. Take advantage of other opportunities to contribute to this discussion. So there's a website, there's an online survey which you can participate in as well, in addition to a self-facilitation guide if you feel that you want to get together a group of individuals to have a little bit more information. So the 5 pillars, I'm going to start with 1 pillar at a time. And Leanne, thanks so much. So if you can forward to slide number 5, and that's pillar number 1. So pillar number 1 speaks to transforming student learning. So under that pillar, we all have high expectations of all students and provide positive, supportive learning environments. On a foundation of literacy and math, students will deal with issues such as environmental sustainability, poverty, and social justice to develop compassion, empathy, and problem-solving skills. Students will develop an understanding of technology and the ability to build healthy relationships. So Leanne, we're on slide 5, which speaks to pillar number 1. Just one more slide and there you are. Perfect, thanks so much. So under this pillar, we have themes around deep learning in mathematics, literacy, early years, inclusion, special education. We also have themes around towards excellence in the education of Black students, grade 9 and 10 academic, suspension, expulsion, and restorative practices. So I hope you were able to have an opportunity to review this prior. So what I'm going to ask you now, if you can use the chat function, if you could identify or let us know, is this still a priority for you in our current context? So if you highly, strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree, if you can just either note that in your chat or a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aline. I'm seeing some thumbs up along the way.
Sorry, this is David Lepofsky. I don't find, I'm no objection to your proceeding this way, but can we get an opportunity to comment after? Because there's high level point that I want to make.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt.
No, there's going to be 2 phases. So phase 1 is to let us know if you agree. And the second one is there anything missing? Is there any considerations or any thoughts that you have? So it'll be 2. So we got, if it's a priority, so now we'll open it up and say, is there anything missing in this pillar? Is there anything else that we should consider?
Elizabeth, there's a question in the room here.
Okay.
Very quick point of process. Basically, those of us in the room here, we're not all online, so we actually aren't able to provide our feedback if we had feedback. So just to note for the record that there may be some additional comments, but we'll try and bring them forward at the end since we aren't able to vote on the items as requested. Thanks.
Okay, and we can also pause for comments in the room. So if people that are in the space want to provide comment on whether they agree or disagree, we can pause to hear. So that makes sure that everyone can have full participation. So is there a comment that you, so I can't see the individual, but is there something that you'd like to offer or let us know if that's still a priority for you?
Thank you. No, it was Richard Carter speaking. I was just kind of making it known that we aren't online in the room. So it was for the record mainly, but as I said, if anybody did have a comment, and as you've invited, they can either provide that now or at the end. So no specific comment other than that. Thank you.
It's David Lepofsky. Could I just offer you one comment, if I may?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, sure, jump all at whatever point you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, great, thanks. There's nothing in any of these that I think I could disagree with. Where you refer to expulsions, I think you should also be including refusals to admit to school for or reduced school day. And just generally, the issue of removing and preventing all barriers impeding students with disabilities should be an explicit statement. It's required by the Human Rights Code, the Charter of Rights, and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And the board doesn't have a comprehensive plan for doing that. So that should be stated as a core. It shouldn't just be sort of woven in somewhere in bits and pieces. It should be a stated goal. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll capture that as feedback.
There's another comment in the room.
Thank you.
Nora.
I just wanted to concur with David that the suspensions and expulsions need modified day, refusal to admit anyway as students not accessing school. And then the other thing I would just comment is if there's some place for communication, like whether that's in the early years or something, but the idea that we're not just oral language is really important and oral communication is super important, particularly given AI and ChatGPT, it might be even more important. So I wouldn't just emphasize print, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you. And if you
Someone is.
Is it okay for me to go? Because I don't know who's moderating, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Isabella from LC4. One area that I'm kind of not seeing here is fine arts. And the reason why I'm saying this is because for some students, especially with complex disabilities, fine arts is the only way that they can communicate. And not only that, arts have a way of also getting across very complex issues in a much more tangible way. And so I see mathematics and I see sciences, and all of them go perfectly with arts, but I don't see anything here that even remotely relates to fine arts and building that sensitivity towards, kind of engaging more with people. So that's my only concern here, I guess, that I see that's missing.
Okay, thank you. And what we'll do is we're articulating that in terms of feedback. So what I hear you saying is how and where does fine arts present itself in terms of the multi-year strategic plan? Thanks so much. So Chair, can I just ask you to monitor the in the boardroom and online, just to make sure that we're not missing anyone and making sure that everybody has an opportunity to contribute.
Okay, thank you. I will.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to pause for a second to see if there are any other comments on Pillar 1 before we move on to Pillar 2. Okay. So Pillar 2 speaks about creating a culture for student and staff well-being. So this pillar, yeah.
There are two hands up. Steve?
Oh, okay.
First.
Yes, just quickly, thank you for the slides. To concur with David regarding suspensions, expulsions, refusal to admit. Refusal to admit is an enormous, absolutely enormous problem that is being used to keep students out of school with no timeline whatsoever. This board needs to stop using it. Regardless of the fact that it's in the Education Act, there is no need for this board to use it. And I think it would be a real step in the right direction for this board, the largest in the country, to stop using refusal to admit on students. It does not belong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Bronwyn has a comment.
Yes, it was about the first one. I didn't see mental health, but now that I see that we've gone to the next slide, I do see it there. I think mental health is a huge factor that is not taken into account, especially with disabilities with our students. So now that I see it here, I guess I don't have any concern now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Aline, can you just give me 1 second just to do a quick overview of this pillar, and then we'll get you to provide your feedback next, if that works.
10 more minutes.
So, in this pillar, it's about creating a culture for student and staff well-being. So we will build positive school cultures and workplaces where mental health and well-being is our priorities for all staff and students. Teachers will be provided with professional learning opportunities and the tools necessary to effectively support students, schools, and communities. And the big themes in this pillar are well-being and mental health, staff well-being, physical well-being, and student voice. So we'll go first to the chat, and then I'll turn it over to the chair to facilitate any feedback within the boardroom. So Aline?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want everyone to go through all the pillars first, because I do want to hear, I think there are some connectivity from the last time, many years ago, to go through this. But one thing I wanted to hear more, if there are not, and want to come back, is the mental health connectivity to in the transition plan, how it's being done, whether it's going from elementary school to middle school, and then from middle school to high school, and then there onwards, whether things are being tracked with the transition plan on the IEP. So that's one thing I want to be able to bring up or observe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
A comment in the room, Richard.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm not looking to rewrite the slides, but I'm thinking that inclusion that is under Pillar 1 really would be most appropriate under Pillar 2. Leave special education under Pillar 1, but I got to think inclusion and just accepting the special education community, it all fits into the well-being, because there is a whole discussion about that. It's not just about having a student sitting in a classroom with special needs, but it's basically the understanding of that student and what their special needs are amongst the entire population. So just a thought for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any additional hands. Steve, is that a legacy hand? Yep. Okay, so we'll move on to pillar number 3. So pillar number 3 speaks to providing equity of access to learning opportunities for all students. So we will ensure that all schools offer a wide range of programming that reflects the voices, choices, abilities, identities, and experiences of students. We will continually review policies, procedures, and practices to ensure that they promote equity, inclusion, and human rights practices and enhance learning opportunities for all students. And so you can see on that screen, there are other main themes around long-term program and accommodation strategy, policy and procedures related to access, secondary program, human rights, employment equity, and accessibility. So I will first go to the hands, any hands that are online before I turn it over to the chair. David, go ahead.
Hey there. A couple things. First, and I don't mean any disrespect, and it's going to sound really disrespectful. This thing is full of every buzzword in the education biz. And to that end, and I don't think you mean it that way, don't get me wrong, but to that end, it actually doesn't tell you anything. Like all this talk about continually review and stuff, as if people are sitting around all day and just reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. And I'm not sure that actually goes on like that. But not only that, there is terminology I'd actually be concerned about. Equity of access is, in the disability context, a dilution of our rights. We're entitled to equal access. We're entitled to full accessibility and nothing less. And terms like equity of access are used by some, and I don't particularly mean you, believe me, but are used by some as a form of dilution. I'm concerned about that. So I suggest more concrete language about what's actually going to be done and less aspirational buzzwords will make this more informative. Back to you.
Okay, thanks for that, for David. So more accessible language that allows multiple entry points and specific, explicit language. So thanks.
If I give you a concrete illustration really quickly, you'd read this and you wouldn't have a clue that the TDSB routinely provides information in inaccessible electronic and hard copy formats that people who are blind or dyslexic cannot read. And they just keep on doing it. They give out stuff in PDFs. So like something that says, we will ensure that we will use only accessible formats, brackets, not PDFs, close brackets, when making information available would mean a whole lot to people, and nobody would get that from what's written here. None whatsoever. Back to you.
Mm-hmm. And thanks. And also just want to remind everybody as we're engaging in this that these are the high-level pillars, and what accompanies this document are the action plans that will be developed and refined as well. And that's where we get additional detail and specificity about each of these pillars as well. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind as well. But David, thank you for that comment. I'm doing a quick check on hands, so I don't see any more hands online. So Chair, I'll turn it over to you, see if there's anyone in the boardroom.
Okay, thank you. I think that is from me. A comment and a suggestion that I will make here is to consider, if it's possible, renaming one of these pillars or adding one pillar about, special education. And this can be wrapped up because special education and the way that it will be described is to, a summary of, what is the expectation from the regulation about special education. And having some of these things there, that will will be more focused. It will be more focused, not diluted everywhere. And say that no, when we're looking for special education, you have to go through all these pillars. You have a pillar, and it is the same reason why we're asking that we have a special education as a strategic budget pillar or driver. In this case, please, if you can consider that, it will be easier because down to that pillar, you see the special education plan that is already required from the ministry and so on. And it will be easily aligned.
Mm-hmm. So just to hear back, so what your recommendation is or your feedback is to have a separate and distinct special education pillar. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Pillar, yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So we'll capture that feedback for consideration. Okay, anyone else in the boardroom, Chair?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to pillar number 4, and that's around allocating human and financial resources strategically to support student needs. So we will allocate resources, renew schools, improve services, and remove barriers and biases to support student achievement and accommodate the different needs of students, staff, guardians, and the community. Themes under this pillar number 4 deal with budget resource allocation, the Learning Opportunities Index, school budgets and financing, equitable distribution of facility resources, and staffing allocation. So I'm going to take a look to see if there are any comments here. I see David, go ahead.
Actually, I didn't take my hand down, but
Okay.
now that you got me, I just want to tell you, I'm not sure what most of this means. I mean, it respectfully, I mean, I don't know what it means. I don't know what what the goal is. I'm sorry, it's not clear. Back to you.
Okay. And so within the multi-year strategic plan and the pillars, as I shared, there are action plans that correspond that go a little bit deeper to speak to what the budget resources, learning opportunity index, and the such. So when we think about budget resources, for example, in our in the attachment, the goal is to ensure that our budgets, the board's flexible funding is utilized to equitably support the needs of all students, speaks to how we're going to achieve it, and also speaks to know if we're successful or not. So each of these items is explained further within the multi-year strategic plans, action plans. When we're talking about learning opportunities index, it's an index that allows us to identify which students or communities require additional supports. School budgets and fundraising, I think that might be a little bit more clear in terms of the definition. Equitable distribution of facilities and resources also speaks to, and staffing allocation on how we're staffing schools. Those are sort of like general themes around that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Elizabeth. We still.
Yeah, so Bronwyn?
Yeah, no, I was just having to echo what David said. I'm finding it sort of vague and words that don't really give clear examples. And I'm lost as well. Like I'm reading this and I have, dyslexia, I can read it, but it's just too broad. It's just, I feel like I'm reading something and then I'm like, okay, I'm done and I'm going to shove it because it's just too much vagueness and it's not straightforward with clear examples. I feel just up there to be a safety net to say we've done it, but there's no real examples of what is actually happening, like step by step. So that's my main concern. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what David was saying, but I just think it's up there just to be put there, but it's not really giving me any security as, representing voice from a DHH organization that anything is really detailedly going to be supporting our organization with our kids that we serve. I just really, this is the problem with the TDSB, and they've got to get this together. And I'm sorry, but this is all about it. It's just too much words and too much vague, and then everything just disappears. And it's just not going to work anymore. People are sick of this. I'm sorry. You have to get word on the ground and understand what examples are under each point.
Okay, so the multi-year strategic plan, action plans, for example, so under the budget resources allocation, so what it speaks to is how the board will analyze the flexible elements of its budget in order to determine whether those resources are being used equitably and bring that analysis to the Board of Trustees for further discussion. So I'll just pause there for a second. So it really is under this larger pillar of the big theme speaks to how we engage in the budget process and what the guiding principles are for the budget process. So I'll just stop there for a second and we'll just chunk it a little bit at a time and then see if there's any additional clarification is required before we move on to the next budget under that. So I see Bronwyn and Beth and Steve, but maybe we can do it in a systematic way and see if there's anybody who wants to comment on the expanded explanation around the budget so that we can get some feedback.
This is Steve, through you, Chair. One of the concerns I have about this pillar for school budgets and fundraising, some schools can fundraise, some schools can't. So the implication I take from this is that there's a relationship between school budgets and fundraising. I don't believe that's actually the case. And when I read the first thing about allocate resources, renew schools, improve services, etc., this board has like a $60 million shortfall. This kind of verbiage doesn't acknowledge the reality that this board is faced with. So I understand learning opportunities and staffing allocations, equitable distribution, but it's still, it's not a realistically worded pillar to allocate human and financial resources to support student needs. I mean, that's pretty obvious. What else are you going to do with it? I mean, anyways, there needs to be much more specificity here, because also what it doesn't take into account is like over 80% of the budget goes to wages. There's $60 million shortfall. There's nothing in here about appropriate management of funds. And that really is necessary, especially when special education is intrinsic throughout every aspect of this board, every classroom, every situation, every teacher, every principal, every superintendent, every caretaker, secretary now has to deal with students with special needs. And Jean-Paul's recommendation for a separate pillar is important. It should also be part of every single thing here. And it's not really even acknowledged. So that's just my thoughts.
Okay. And thank you for that. And just as we go through, because I want to make sure that everybody is clear on what these parts are. Anybody else who has their hand up in the boardroom or online who has anything to add around the budget resources allocation before we move on to the Learning Opportunities Index?
Please, can you speed up a little bit, Elizabeth?
Can I do what?
Speed up, please.
Speed. Oh, yeah. Yes, I'm trying to be responsive to the comment that it wasn't clear. So, it's the group's 20 minutes. So I heard that they wasn't clarity around the Learning Opportunities Index and the school budget. So I wanted to provide an opportunity to clarity so that people can add authentic pieces. But if you want me to move on to the next piece, or if people then want to review this on their own or individually and they want to provide additional feedback, we can do that. So if you want me to go on to the next pillar,
one, please.
Yeah, you want me to go on to the next pillar? Okay. So the next pillar 5 is around building strong relationships and partnerships within school communities to support student learning and well-being. So this big themes under this pillar speak with both internal and external communications, ability to have access to DDSB data, issues managements for school and leaderships, and the other 2 points that are there. I'll just stop to see if there are any questions within on the line for, I see Beth for pillar 5. Thoughts, what's missing, comments?
In the room, we have Nora.
Hi, I'll just add in, first of all, Elizabeth, thank you very much. And you're coming into sort of this is a difficult sort of situation to get into. So I just appreciate you being here and what you're presenting. I think for me specifically, and I might be hearing that from other people too, if you could just, and I'm new to this, I'm new to SEAC. So with each pillar that's been presented, and I think I'm echoing other comments too, if you could speak specifically to special education and our students that we're advocating for, specifically I'm representing CADAC, so the many students with an ADHD diagnosis. So, but just in general, speaking to how these relate to special education, that's what I need to see to sort of to let you know whether I agree or disagree, or like, so the information is important, but it's not quite enough just in terms of what I'm looking for. with like the students that I'm representing with ADHD. So
Yeah,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is an easy task. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And part of it, as we go to different CACs, different communities, and different stakeholders, these are our strategic guiding principles. And then what we're asking is from your lens. So as you're looking at this, and perhaps that as you're reading the description with the pillar around strong students, the question then from that is, if it's an individual who has special education supports, how do they enter in this pillar? So that's what we're looking for. So from your lens and your experience, thinking about the supports around special education and inclusion, is there something that's missing in the wording or something that we need to take in consideration? So that's what we're looking for. So when we do the CACs for a CAC, it looks like that. For example, another CAC, their lens is different. So that's how we're approaching this. So it's exactly that. We're trying to draw on your experience with special education and inclusion. What's missing here? What don't you see? And what do we need to take into consideration?
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. We have one hand here. Before, I give the floor to Nora. Please, we have Pierre and Sia and CACs. It's different. That's exactly based on that reason that I've suggested that we have a special education pillar. Because when you're putting all this, you say CACs, I think that is not the same thing. Thank you.
So let me clarify that. So my point was that part of the engagement where we go to different communities, different CACs or advisory councils, there's a variety, like 2 from the Ministry of CACs and advisory councils. They're all coming from, their committees are from a specific point of view. So my point it was sharing is that from these different points of views, I'm not saying that they're all the same, but they're coming at them from a different perspective, and we want to hear the diverse perspectives.
Okay, thank you. Maybe when you have a special pillar, we'll continue the conversation to make sure that it's well articulated. Nora?
So thanks, Elizabeth. And I love the way you explained it at the end, like through our lens. So one of the groups that's, I would say, is missing on this pillar is the fact that we have community agencies that work with our families very closely from start of school to adulthood. And I don't sort of see it represented that we would have all kinds of organizations working with our families and students. And I guess my second comment is, you explained it really eloquently that all of these pillars impact our students. I want the assurance, and I think our committee wants the assurance that staff that aren't special education staff are aware that when they're striking responses, because I know this will drive action plans, how do you make sure they don't forget that special education? So respectfully, Jean-Paul, I don't want it to be its own thing, but I almost want everybody to go, remember special education on every pillar, because every pillar touches our kids. So how do we, in your short staff, make sure you have enough bodies to go running around with all these committees and action plans, making sure that somebody doesn't operationalize something and negate the existence of our students? I think that's what the committee is hoping they would hear. And I get that it's a high-level overview, Elizabeth, but for us, it's in the details. It's all it's like the difference between policy and operating procedure. Policy is kind of like, this is like nice to have, and operating procedures where all the details live that exclude. That's what we're talking about. So that's my concern, Elizabeth, is how are all these committees and action plans going to make sure that special education isn't seen as a silo somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
I think we 10 minutes over. Please, can you conclude, Elizabeth?
It's David. I actually do want to raise one additional point, Jean-Paul, if I may.
Okay.
It'll be quick.
We have 2 more people. And
okay, sure. I'll go after them.
We have David and Richard, and Elizabeth will conclude.
Okay, you want me to go first?
And I have a point too. This is Aileen.
Sorry, I didn't see you, Aileen. Sorry, yes. Yeah, let us record with all these 3.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Okay, great. Thank you. 2 things. One is this document, I just searched, does not even use the word disability. It talks about Black kids. That's great. It talks about Indigenous education. That's great. It talks about special education. But special education does not cover all disabilities. It's one of the problems, one of the barriers in the system. We don't even get tokenism, which is a problem. But the other problem is this. I understand that a strategic plan is high level and it's different from action plans, but a strategic plan should point in a direction. It should tell you something about the direction you're going. And this thing largely doesn't. In some areas it does, but for the most part, it doesn't. It might as well just say, we got one pillar. Let's treat kids well and hope they learn or help them learn, which we'd all agree is not enough. So sorry to be that way, but I really think that it especially for our kids, needs a lot more meat on the bones before you could ever hope that action plans are going to be helpful. Back to you.
No, thank you, David. Let us have all the three first before you conclude, Richard.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at pillar number 5, and I actually think we have the lens cap on the camera. We need to remove the lens cap. I'm really kind of undecided with the wording. Build strong relationships and partnerships within school communities. I think it's got to go beyond that. And I know the conversation the Associate Director of Education and I were having prior to the meeting tonight, Louise, in her title, take it from her business card, Instructional Innovation and Equitable Outcomes. Instead of saying support student learning and well-being, we need to talk about student outcomes, because Louise and I were talking about students with intellectual disabilities. How can we get them employment at the end of the day? It's not just about them learning and feeling good and building relationships within the school community. We have to build it in the broader community, and it's about the ultimate outcome. When the school doors open at the end of either grade 12 or 21, that they are prepared for that community. And so I think we need to really expand this to all communities and student outcomes, and basically potentially either path to employment, path to further education, but it shouldn't just end with student learning and well-being. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Eileen before we conclude. Eileen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for the presentation. I totally agree with what Richard mentioned. And I think when you were here last time, I did bring out one point about the open access to TDSB data, which is, I'm very happy to see this, but I'd like to bring a connector back to the other 4 pillars, because I think all 5 pillars are interconnected and intertwined in a way. I'd like to point out very quick 3 points for your consideration. Whatever we talk about inclusion, I think it should be included in pillar 3. I would like that for your consideration. And also, I believe the STEP PRC should be one of the policy and procedure related to access. So this is a part, that's why I really wanted my special education plan associate to be able to, come together and see your presentation. So this is great. So I know that you might be going into details for other things, but I hope that even with the high level, STEP PRC is one of the access points for consideration. And I want to go on to employment equity. I think the pillar 3 employment equity, and also the tying to open access to TDSB data for pillar 5, and the government relationships and City Toronto public advocacy and community engagement standards. I think they are all intertwined as well. So I hope that when we get some more detail right up, I'm hoping there are steps in there to guide us, or maybe to confirm what we are doing now. It's actually meeting the outcomes. And I think I've shared, this is my last point, about success stories. I really like to see success stories of individuals, for instance, in upper education. For instance, if one individual graduated from certain school did span, where are they at now? Like 5 years, 10 years, right? So I'm really want to see that. Or with special education in our case, where are they at right now? Whether they are in a college pathway, a post-secondary pathway, or whether they are working right now or taking any apprenticeship. So I really wanted to see that scenario, so we know the money that we spend are actually getting outcomes that we are guiding. So I think this is crucial of helping us to do what we do here every month, that we are volunteer every month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think Nandi wants to say something before we pass on the floor to Elizabeth to wrap up.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say that the Special Education and Inclusion Department did invite Elizabeth and her team to come spend quite a bit of time with us so we can give feedback. And a lot of the feedback that you're sharing is feedback that we did give to Elizabeth around the multi-year strategic plan, Richard around post-21, to David's point around ableism and disability not being mentioned in there, and that it needs to be, if we're going to say anti-racism, we need to say anti-ableism and things like that. So I just wanted you to know from a staff perspective as well that we did invite Elizabeth to spend time with us. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Elizabeth, can you please wrap up?
Yeah, I just thank you for having us back for a second time. And, as we're going through this renewal process, this is all being done in stages. So at this stage, as we're trying to gather a variety of inputs to see how that's going to reshape the renewal. So it is a renewal and not starting from scratch. So we already do have a foundation. We know there's a current context that we have. We've just come out of COVID. It's impacted a lot of lives. The way we see public education has shifted. So thank you very much for this bit of feedback. We're continuing the engagement process up until October. So as I said, if there's anything else that you'd like to offer, there's many ways to do that through surveys. Check out the website or feel free to loop back with me, and we're taking all this feedback in and seeing how we can, refine and renew the multi-year strategic plan for the next 4 to 6 years. So thank you very much for having us back, and enjoy the rest of your session.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for. Okay, now the next item is trustees' report. Now it's an update, an important update from the board.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be quick. So I just wanted to let the committee know, because we've had some changes over the last year that hit the ground in the current cycle. So some big reviews that happened over the last year, and changes were about a year and a half worth of review of the board, TDSB board bylaws, which then also included the delegations procedure. And there was also a parallel review of community advisory committees and recommendations that have come out of that for procedures in terms of reference. So I've asked Leanne to send links. I'm just want to provide a quick update and then plant a seed for terms of reference for this committee. So this committee does lack a terms of reference, and I know that there has been work done on that in the past that didn't result in a terms of reference. There is a sort of bylaws piece that the committee has that is just a reword, like a reflection of the legislation, but it's not really a terms of reference with respect to how the committee operates and committee norms. But some of the things I want to clarify for how the committee interacts with the board, or all committees interact with the board via delegations. So the delegations procedure has been updated to fine tune it a bit. Delegates can be anybody. They're available to members of the public to come as individuals. CACs can also come through that process if they like, if the committee wants to send, approves sending someone to speak on something. However, committees as a whole, once you make a recommendation, actually come to the board through a more formal process that is included within the meeting. Delegations, in using the public delegation procedure, individuals are limited to 5 minutes for speaking, and then there's 3 minutes 3 minutes for each trustee to ask questions of clarification only. So it's not a dialogue, staff don't get involved. It's a more limited procedure. Committee reports, and this is recommendations that come from the committee, go to the relevant committee. So all the reports used to go to the Program and School Services Committee, which meant a very long night, because the Program and School Services Committee also has very large staff reports. So it meant a very long night of report after report. Now, committee recommendations go to the relevant committee considering that. So the old bylaws or old procedure was that your recommendation would go to PSSC. PSSC, if it was a financial issue, PSSC would then have to recommend it to finance. It would have to go to a second committee. It would increase the amount of time. So to make it more efficient, recommendations now go to the relevant committee based on that topic. So if you're making a recommendation that's financial, it'll go to the finance committee. If it's on programming, it'll go to Program and School Services, most likely, or on infrastructure, it would go to Planning and Priorities Committee to make it more efficient. The committee procedure with the report, is the chair comes and delegates. The chair comes as the representative to speak to this on behalf. The only place where there's somebody else would come with them is if the chair invites somebody or defers to somebody else. So like would happen with our own chair, we expect the chair of the committee, we expect the board chair or a committee chair to go to speak to an issue brought forward by that committee. And if our chair is not available, then they would designate someone to come speak on their behalf. So when a committee report comes to, when an advisory committee, statutory committee or advisory committee report comes to a board committee, it's the chair that comes to speak to that. So I want to make that clear. So Leanne's going to send the links to these pieces. The other piece I wanted to say, when that report comes to committee, recommendation from an advisory committee comes to a board committee, the chair that's coming to speak to that matter is there to speak to that matter and that matter only. So it's not an opportunity to include other things that may have been going on at the committee or bring up other topics. So it's very focused on that piece, so the recommendation that's in front of the committee itself. Anyway, looking through what's the reviews that have happened through the board, at the board level this past year, there's a lot of resources that have been built up that are, and are also coming, I think that would really help this committee put together and finalize a terms of reference. I understand that there is still on the books the terms of reference that was previously developed, so it's not having to reinvent the wheel. But the work has to go forward this fall to get the committee to adopt that, because that's, I think, the thing that did not happen previously, if I recall, about 1.5 to 2 years ago. So I think you're gonna send out an invitation to reform a terms of reference working group to start on that. And then there's lots of resources to work on going forward. Sorry, Richard?
Thank you very much, Michelle, for that information. Not knowing what links Leanne's going to send us at this point, can you speak to, or at least ensure that SEAC receives kind of the streamline as to who our motions should go to? Like, how will our motions be handled? Should we be directing them then to the specific committees, and will we get a list of those committees so that we know who to direct our motions to that go to board? How will we best handle that moving forward? Thanks.
Okay, so usually staff does that by topic. So unless there's other clarifications, the motion that came to FBEC around data a few years ago, there was discussion about whether that would go to PSSC because it was data and kind of report, like program reporting, or should it go to finance? But the intention from the committee was it to be presented as part of the budget. So it went to finance. So staff would look at the recommendation and make sure that the relevant committee is considering the report in front of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
David online and Melissa's got her hand up.
Okay, David. David, is it the legacy hand or?
No.
I think it's the
That was
legacy.
legacy.
There, sorry, it was up by accident. I took it down.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Oh, sorry, Melissa also.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I observed Nora presenting to FBEC a couple of months ago, and it was so wonderful. Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, for allowing your colleagues to speak to the motions that they've worked very hard on. Nora was so well informed in speaking with the trustees. She got, I think, a lot of engagement and understanding because she has such a deep knowledge. I presented with Jean-Paul, but the PAC calendar motion about a month ago, and I had been meaning to send my speaking notes to SEAC, which I will do subsequently. I'll just note that it was very helpful to be able to sort of dive into that as a community association committee instead of as a delegate where it's only points of clarification. Got some very good questions from trustees, and then 3 trustees who I've never spoken with before stayed for an hour and a half after the meeting ended and talked to me about all kinds of things about special education and about the motion. So it's very good to be able to engage that way.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna clarify and say that in advance of the meeting, the chair has to designate the person that attends the meeting. So if the chair feels can't make it or is unprepared for the meeting, then they have to let the board know in advance. They have to ask or designate somebody else to attend on their behalf. So I just want to make that clear. Of course, members can come, the meetings are public, members can come attend, they're welcome to do that. Individuals are welcome to delegate. But the procedure is not an open, everybody come talk to the board.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Now that is item number 4. I think that is
Sorry, no, no.
the state PRCA, discussion. I think that is, following what is in the handbook. I'll let staff, provide us with a status update, and if there's any issue, any plan of actions before we move into, the special education working group update.
You're asking about SEPRC?
Yes.
Yeah,
discussion.
so when staff, sorry, I have one of these weird mics, unlike everybody else. When staff met with the special education plan work group in May to review recommendations made by the work group. I did commit to doing a full review of SEPRC in the fall, and that commitment stands, that we will be undergoing a rigorous review of SEPRC in the fall.
Did you identify any issue? What is triggering this review
So the review is
from the
part.
staff perspective? Sorry.
Yeah, so the review has come forward, the issue of SEPRC has been raised by the Special Education Plan Subcommittee, is my understanding, for a number of years in TDSB. The understanding is that at some point, SEPRC was open to all new students coming into the TDSB, the initial creation of SEPRC was for medically or physically complex students. Somewhere along the line, I understand that it got changed to include all students new to the TDSB, and then it got changed back to its original intent, which was for placing students with complex physical or medical needs. And that is the model that we've been following. However, there has been suggestions from the Special Education Work Group subcommittee that the process needs to go back to how it was to be open to everyone, and that's why I committed to doing a review, because I wasn't here all those years ago, so I'd really like to go back and do a deep dive, and also to look at access and to look at Regulation 18198 and the TDSB's commitment to look at inclusion and placing students in regular classes as a first placement option before we look at intensive support programs as an example for students. So it's multi-layered, really, why we're doing the review, but it is a review that will take time and that staff did commit to doing.
If I may dovetail on Nandi's comments through you, Chair. The practice of neighboring boards, they don't have something called a SEPRC, but the practice is really the same. For all of us, we want to be welcoming students in the least restrictive environment for their success. Because we know that when students are included with their peers in regular classroom placement, wherever possible, positive outcomes happen for social development and so on. Some of our students with highest level of need absolutely require specialized congregated sites. Those students are typically medically fragile, needing more than 2 staff to be supporting them. And in those cases, when we are aware of a student is coming to register in one of our schools and a family shares with us that their child has extraordinary needs, having that first placement in a regular class would be very highly problematic. It would put their safety at risk. So neighboring boards will take that information and be offering placement for that student. So they're starting on that first day within a congregated setting to make sure that their medical needs and specialized needs are met. In TDSB, we've created a process that we've tried to write that emulates that. I think there's confusion for other students who are perhaps wanting a congregated setting for needs that are not that exceptionally challenging, that we, after we've done our observation for the student, we feel a regular class placement in a home school would be the appropriate beginning for that student that we're welcoming to TDSB for the first time. We're getting to know that student, and then we would go on the beginning journey of knowing that child's profile and following the SST process with consideration of a congregated site if that is necessary for that student's success. The concern that we have and why we want to do a really careful review is understanding the history of why does TDSB have this written and codified, and are there barriers that exist from our families in registering at their local school? What are they? And might a SEPRC and the desire to have a SEPRC actually incentivize families to wanting a contained class placement or a congregated placement because of some misinformation that might be pervasive. So we want to elevate voice of our parents. We want to understand practice and then make a really strong, positive recommendation. Common goals, I think that we all share, is that we want our students to be meeting with success. We want them to feel warmly welcomed in our TDSB schools. And we want to be having them placed in the least restrictive environment and making sure that we're working with our families to get that right. So much more to come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just add one comment as well? And so Louise mentioned neighboring boards, and I do want to mention that SEPRC is not a ministry process. SEPRC is unique to the TDSB. TDSB is the only board that has this process. So that is also something that we are taking into consideration, that SEPRC is not a ministry mandated process like IPRCs, for example. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that is, but you don't have, you only know when you would start the review, that is in the fall, but you don't know when it will be completed.
I could say within the next school year, it would be completed. We wouldn't know until we start the review how deep we need to go. We would also want to do a jurisdictional scan and do due diligence to find out, since, as I just referenced, that this process is unique to TDSB, what other school districts do, and as Louise mentioned, what recommendations we would have put in place to ensure that students are welcomed and can begin school as quickly as they can.
In the meantime, it will be restricted. That's what I'm understanding.
In the meantime, SEPRC will continue to follow the process that it has, we've been following in terms of placements for medically fragile or students with physical needs who cannot, even for a short period of time, access learning in their local home school.
Okay, now I think that is, I think you heard, the special educational plan working group, you heard the status provided by the staff. Is it, any comment so that we can move quickly to go into a decision? Yes.
Sure. So thank you very much. And I'll just note that we're now 10 minutes into a 15-minute item that we're starting very late. So I'm going to just try to make this very fast without getting into the weeds now. I just will note one point, which is we did have a parent do an exhaustive literature review, and no one has ever been able to find any evidence that the original intent was to have a restricted process. The best information we have is that it never was restricted. People may think differently, but there's been a lot of turnover since then. But in any event, proponents of removing the restrictions believe that what may or may not have been intended or happened a decade ago is not relevant now, because we have thousands of families who feel very strongly that this SEPRC process was very important to their children and their children's success. And that isn't saying that that's for everybody, but it is a parent-initiated process that parents can choose to reject or accept a recommendation at any point. So it's really something for parents who want this, and for parents who don't, they just don't apply. They show up at a regular class in school in September. I don't want to get into debating the substance of it because we have a motion on the floor. The motion was circulated more than a month ago. I'd like to just highlight a few very brief points about it, and then perhaps we move to vote on it. I can see Leanne has just put the motion on the screen, which is great. So I'm just going to sort of identify. This was a draft very similar to this was circulated in May. At the time, the comments were more that people in the first day or so wanted to have more time to review. Since then, I've recirculated the motion in June and have only received 2 types of feedback from SEAC. So it's been out there for more than a month. The first type of feedback received was what all of our SEAC reps saw in the email exchange with Nora and Leo and then me. Nora was basically, I think, linking this to ISPs and suggesting to have an outcome report requested, which is a good idea, but I think it's a separate issue from the SEPRC. So that's not part of this. So what we're looking at is really substantially the motion that was put forth more than a month ago. The only other type of feedback I've received was from Leo individually. Thank you very much, Leo. And he offered some just sort of cosmetic drafting smoothing. So he didn't change the substance, but if you see that the words are prettier or flow better than the original draft, that's thank you very much to Leo. So I had a few prepared comments that I was going to make, but we're very short of time. What I would just say is,
if I may, now that we heard from the staff, and I think that is the substance is that we need the restriction to be lifted.
with respect, no, we heard from staff, but SEAC reps have brought forth a motion. The motion is on the floor. I'd like to move
Not
it.
yet. We'll bring it.
Okay,
It is
so-
somewhere in the edge there.
Right,
Bring
so-
it in when someone will kind of
Right.
move it.
So,
Jean-Paul, can I
sorry,
just
wait a
offer a
second, David.
comment/question for staff?
Sorry, David, can I just finish for a
Oh,
moment?
sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
Yeah, thanks. The reason that staff is doing the review, and we appreciate that they're doing that next year, is because there's been a lot of sustained feedback that people wanted this looked at because they thought the restrictions, which our view is were recent, are not helpful to many students. So we appreciate that a review will occur next year, but in the meantime, we have families who are hoping for more immediate relief, and that's really what this motion is linked to. So both things can happen in parallel, but I'd like to move the motion, have a vote from SEAC, and if it's approved, then we'll take it to trustees and see where it goes from there.
No, I think that is because the staff will say that staff is entertaining the status quo while they will start to begin with the review next school year. But what we want is to lift the current restriction, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then that is, let us keep it that way, simple. We want to lift the restriction, and we
Just
appreciate the fact
go back
that,
to the way it was through the 20 teams.
yes, we appreciate the fact that staff will be going through an intensive review. You know, if it is only that, we can bring the motion and vote on. If it's that, and vote on. If everyone said that we need the board to lift the restriction, yea, no, and see what happens. You know, is it, you know, we don't have, I know we have David is waiting and Richard. If it is something that, you know, we can, you know, we'll finish bringing the motion.
Yep.
Okay. Richard, go ahead, please. Sorry, David first, sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first, I am supporting the motion. Second, I don't understand why staff did not come to this SEAC, and I don't recall that you did unless I'm wrong, before this major cutback to get our input. That would have been the appropriate role of this committee and what staff should have done. Now, I know some of these staff are new, so you weren't here when that happened, but that doesn't make it any better. Third, I want to substantially answer the question that sounded like it needs a deep dive and months of research. It doesn't. The origin of the SEPRC came from a legal opinion, which I think the board got from Brenda Bowlby. We were told some years ago at the board that on council's advice, they can't do an IEP, or pardon me, an IPRC for a student who's not already registered at the board. So the SEPRC was a way to be able to provide the same due process that an IPRC is supposed to for an incoming student, with the advantage of being slightly more flexible and informal and enabling the child to know where they're going on day one, not to have to wait the days, weeks, or sometimes months before there's an IPRC. Whether other boards take a different view or the ministry doesn't mandate that, if it's useful, and I firsthand experience that it is, it doesn't make sense to get rid of it or to do a deep dive due diligence and months of research just to find out what I just told you. And the final thing is, I think respectfully, both Louise and Andy, I have to respectfully disagree with you. You're making as a core thing that there's a commitment to education in the least restrictive environment. Fantastic. But that somehow having SEP-RCs is inconsistent with that. Well, that would be the same as saying IPRCs are inconsistent with it. So let's get rid of those for everybody except medically compromised kids. You could do a SEP-RC and give the same advice or take the same analytical approach that you've been taking for years at an IPRC, which is here are your options, but we go for the least restrictive and so on. So I think it's absolutely mixing things up to say that that's a justification for reducing them. You don't deny due process on a basis like that. So it sounds to me like we need this motion because you need to get these SEP-RCs back up and running while the board figures out for months or deep diving or whatever what they want, but don't compromise kids in the meantime. So I'm with Melissa and I want this passed. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, David. Can I assume that you completed the process of bringing this motion to the floor? Because,
Melissa, do you want to formally move it?
Yes, I mean, Melissa, kind of move. Did you second? Can I assume that you seconded?
I'm happy to.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think that means we have the motion on the floor now. And if it's not placed, complicated, we all agree. Let us just go straight to the vote, not open, kind of discussion again. Yes, Richard.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree that there needs to be a formal process in place, because quite clearly there is a gap, it sounds like, with the IPRC and the timing when it can be done. I also hear that other boards are in similar situations and have different processes that may cover this, but I think it would be upon the board, and I'm saying this from my representative's hat, not in my working group hat, that the board go to the ministry with what this SEP-RC looks like or what the process would be to get the ministry to mandate across the province. Because I received at 4:10 this afternoon, unknown to the sender that I'd be attending the meeting tonight, they attended a meeting at their local school. They registered their child in February for kindergarten. They were called to a meeting today, and I was unable to get clarity before the meeting if it was considered a SEP-RC. But I'm going to read you this in 30 seconds, and I think you'll all understand how appalling this is and how they've been caught somewhere in a deep crevice of a process that may not be in place fully. One of the families I am connected with has a daughter with Down syndrome who will turn 4 in November. They registered their daughter at the Toronto District School Board's homeschool in their neighborhood and just had a meeting with the principal and special education lead today, where they were informed the school does not have the resources to accommodate their daughter's needs, i.e. help with walking upstairs, toileting, and some feeding assistance. Is this something the parent is asking the board is legally allowed to do? And do I have any guidance on this? For 20 years, I've been trying to change the direction. This happened to me 20 years ago. And 20 years later, it's still happening. And I brought this up earlier tonight prior to the meeting, and the board is absolutely going to look into it. But here is an example of a meeting occurring, parents being told information, and not being given the whole story as to what's available to their child when they start school. It looks like the placement needs to be in an ISP because, again, I will read it. They basically were told the school does not have the resources to accommodate their daughter's needs, but it does not say the school will do everything they can to accommodate the needs and how to get those resources. So there is a huge, huge gap from this level up here to what's happening on the floor at the school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. It's really, kind of unfortunate that it's still happening. And we all here because of, sharing the same passion as I said in an email. If, hearing this, is really is shocking. Thank you for sharing that. Yes or no?
So I just have to say, I know I've heard from different associations and what their families have said, and my association exists because of stories like Richard's and is full of parents who continually to this day face exclusion from their local school because the power imbalance from staff to parent when a parent is not informed about the TDSB and the staff is immeasurable. And you start compounding that with different identities about income, education, language, it's overwhelming. So right now, my phone is blowing up about people's comments about where medically fragile children belong because they are so hurt that it is assumed that every parent with a medically fragile kid would want an ISP. People in my association have explicitly joined, not because we have an exceptionality, but because we have a philosophical belief about where our children belong in society and how they fit in their communities. I understand we obviously all have different perspectives, but I don't want it to look like there aren't a group of parents that are facing oppression every day and continue to from the moment they register, and it's a yearly fight to stay in their local school. And as resources are cut, it's been my appearance that it looks like it comes from the regular class. So it's a little difficult to support a process when you know that's going to play into, or you feel, and our concern is going to play into the hands of a huge power imbalance.
Thank you for sharing. I think we have Leo, the last comment here, and we go on to vote for the motion.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just have a short comment, and I think it goes to some things that were raised here. We have lots of reps from Autism Ontario and other boards, specifically in smaller cities across Ontario. And some feedback that we get is that smaller boards, they might be nimble enough to offer more informal accommodations through simple chats with principals. That's what we get back. You just go there, you talk to the principal, and you solve it, right? The issue is that we can't do something like that in the TDSB. We are not the same type of board. Don't have our scale necessitates a formalized, well-structured process. If you try to do something in the TDSB without going through the process, you get smashed and crushed. It's that simple, right? So to ensure that all students receive the appropriate attention and support, we need to lift those restrictions. They compromise our commitments to fair treatment, right? I recently spoke to a parent who was moving from British Columbia to Ontario, and he phoned up he thought it was like a small board, let's put it that way. And he phoned the principal, and he asked the principal that he would need placement in a special education classroom because his child was an eloper and would run, right, and dozens of other issues, and he knew that the child needed an ISP for a number of reasons that we don't have to bring up here, and then he was fine, and then he moved from British Columbia to Ontario, and when he arrived on first day of school, surprise, there was no ISP. The principal forgot. Or at least he said he forgot. And the child stayed without going to school until October, after contacting us, and we instructed him and guided him to request a formal process, because in the TDSB, unfortunately, without a process, you get crushed. And he got crushed, and the child was out of school for a whole month. So, what I'm saying is, since we do need process, because we are bureaucratic, because we are the biggest school board in the country, let's open it up so that everyone can access it. Not only that, let's communicate it so that all parents know that it exists and that it's an option, right? And again, to that point that some people made, it's an option. You don't have to follow it if you don't want to.
Thank you, Leo.
That's the point I wanted to bring. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now let us pass on to the vote. I mean, that is, what we're asking the board here is really to lift the restriction that is on separacy. And you can see, you probably had a chance to read through all the, whereas, and also the recommendation that we're making here. And I think Lian would help monitor the vote. Just put, I think, a yes for the motion, in the chat, and in the room here, we get people and we count, move on. Thank you.
Okay, so I will count the hands.
Yes, and yes.
If people would raise their hand to vote yes.
Yes, yeah.
Leave your hand down to vote no.
Okay.
And then you can gather.
No, vote. Let's not vote. We'll move on. Sorry.
Can we, sorry, I just see a couple alternates voting. We need to make sure that you're only voting if the representative is not there. So if you're an alternate and your rep is there, please don't vote.
Julie's not here. That's why I have my hand up. I'm voting.
No, I realize that, yep.
Oh, thanks.
And same thing here. I'm voting because Tracy's not here.
Right, great, thank you. So I have 9 yeses in the
And we have
meeting.
Leanne, also Melissa in the room.
And somebody's collecting. So how many votes are there in the boardroom?
1.
1, okay. So I just need a minute to do a tally of attendance and see if that passes. I'm just double checking.
Hi, it's David. I'm not sure if my hand is up or down, but I'm voting yes.
Okay, it's up, thank you.
Sorry, Leanne, I think David's hand wasn't up initially, but Narissa's was. Oh, and Diane, people are putting up and down. So-
No,
Yeah.
she's doing the work. Sorry.
She has the.
Mine was a mistake. I was answering a question from before, so I put mine down. It was an error.
Okay. So I have 9 in total.
Okay, I mean, that is passes. Okay, thank you.
I have to check to see if that passes or not, based on attendance. So if you just give me a minute,
No, Chair, no.
so I have to go with current attendance.
Yeah. If tie.
Leanne, sorry, it's AD Sarisco. Just, you heard Diane's comment?
Yeah,
Okay.
mine doesn't count. Sorry.
No, yes, I realize that.
Okay.
So.
While I'm sorry to to say this.
I'm just
Yes.
double checking because it's very close, because we have 18
Yes, go ahead.
members attending and we need half plus 1. So I'm just going to do a double check again.
Yeah, go ahead. As we're going ahead, it's 9. I was saying that.
I believe it's 8. So I think I was originally counting the hand, Diane's hand that was up for another reason.
Sorry, maybe we could just do a roll call on the yeses.
I
think
was
it's
just
9.
asking, it's 9. No, this is nothing to do with it's 9.
9.
I really, anyway, we need to go through some of this item. Anyone, moving to extend the meeting so that we can cover. Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Second. Thank you, Richard.
Yes, so that does pass.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, the motion, pass. I think that is, it means that, we're recommending that the board lift the restriction on separacy. Thank you. Thanks to the member of the special education, special education plan working group. And the next item, I think it's still a special education plan working group. For the update, the additional update. Who is doing that? Is it you, Melissa, or someone else?
So we're going to do this high speed. Richard's going to give a very quick update on special education plan working group. And then I think we've still got Kirsten online who would like to do a very quick effective practices.
And first of all, like a thank you to everybody on the working group, and including Susan and Elizabeth and any other staff and all the staff that have worked on it. One thing that I did ask, the special education plan has a mechanism to provide feedback and comments. And I asked Elizabeth, I said, so how much feedback and comments have we received? And my understanding is through that mechanism, there was 0 feedback. So that either says the special education plan is perfect the way it is, nobody's looking at it, nobody's providing feedback. And even from the SEAC, I definitely would encourage more people to join. We have representation on the special ed plan working group from a couple of associations, but we definitely don't have more wide coverage of SEAC on that working group. And I think that is invaluable to putting our heads together. So when we do come up with something and we bring a report to SEAC, it is more, it's got more coverage than what it does currently. So I would ask everybody to consider joining that group, or certain increase in the number of SEAC members on that group, because right now it is very limited. And I think it would serve us all well and serve the students and everybody else. I'll turn it over to Melissa. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. So I just want to add very quickly, first of all, we really want to thank Susan Moulton, who unfortunately is retiring. She's been a big help to us over the last couple of years. Next of all, we have been talking in the group for quite a while about a process for how to better engage SEAC reps' feedback next year into the plan, because every year we want to keep working on the plan. And I think we're short of time now, but just a sort of preview of it is we'll be probably coming to meetings next year with a particular topic and inviting people to give feedback on that. For example, something like IEPs, and we'll pick some other sort of topical topics like that. So in September, we can elaborate on that, but we really, first of all, we encourage everybody to give feedback on the plan, whether you're part of the working group or not. You can just always provide a comment if you have an idea. And the second thing I would just say generally is we really do encourage everyone, whether you have a lot of experience or not, to join working groups, because it's a great way not only to become engaged, but to learn more. So you can come and sort of learn, even if you're not really ready to have a lot of output yet. So everyone's welcome to all of the working groups.
And lastly, I would say,
Thank you.
we'd like to add on the agenda as a monthly item, the special ed plan working group, because working with staff, we are going to focus on a section every single month. Staff has a plan for that, and we'd like to help them support that plan as they support us. So it should be an ongoing agenda item. Thank you.
And I think that is maybe it was not well communicated. The roadmap or the presentation that we were, kind of scheduling for on a monthly basis was really to engage all the members, association and community rep, engage them to bring all the challenges that they're having, through the membership or the client in accessing, special education services, and to feed into the plan, to the improvement of the plan. That's exactly the whole idea of having all this, getting the challenge that this member, the client from this member are facing. That was, maybe it was not well communicated. I'm sorry about that. Now, the next item, thanks, for the update on this. And the next item is, the staff leadership report.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, Jean-Paul, where were you thinking to have the update from Kirsten?
It is the
The effective practices.
Yes, I think that was on the other business. We'll cover it.
Okay.
We'll cover it. Okay, staff, Lois, is it?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I'll begin, and we'll be inviting System Superintendent Palmer to add from the report that is in the agenda. I would just like to begin by expressing my gratitude to members of SEAC who joined during 4 drop-in sessions that were held. We had very rich conversations on SEAC and how staff can be supporting SEAC and our collective work. To echo Trustee Art's comments earlier, in each of the sessions, there was recommendations to develop a terms of reference so that our very brief time together every month is just really rich and runs smoothly, and we all have a clear understanding of how the meeting is to run so that as many voices as possible are heard. There was a request for fulsome orientation and the development and consistent updating of a SEAC handbook, and to be considering introducing timing for speakers. So again, to just maximize the number of people that are heard on topics. Certainly not everyone on SEAC was able to attend a midday and an early evening session. So what I was going to do next is send out a Google form for individuals who that might be an easier way to share their reflections and best advice for us. And then I was going to create a report, an anonymized report for the fall, so that we're able to turn those suggestions into action for consideration from the committee. And certainly in regarding agenda setting and at the beginning of this evening's meeting, I can be supporting the chair and the vice chair in thinking about that terms of reference and formulating concepts for working group sessions and what have you, and perhaps making that a point of further conversation in the Google form to get advice from SEAC to go to committee leaders. And now I'll invite Superintendent Palmer.
Thank you. I won't go through each of the items on the leadership report. It was shared last week with the meeting mail out. I'll just highlight for SEAC that we did revise our guide to special education for parents, guardians, and caregivers. So that was updated June 2023, and it has been posted on the public website and in audio format as well as print, and the links are there in the leadership report. We are in the process of getting the document translated and also having copies in Braille available, which should be done all before the end of June. I do want to take a minute to say a huge thank you and congratulations to centrally assigned Principal Susan Moulton, who has been in the department, I believe, for 6 years and has done outstanding work. Susan has attended every single SEAC meeting this year, and she is online, and very happy for Susan that she's going on this new step in her life, but very sad for the department because Susan has a wealth of special education knowledge and experience, and she's taking all of that with her. But I think we'll be reaching out to her next year. So Susan, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. Susan was also part of the special education plan work group as the staff rep, and you did great work with that subcommittee, Susan, so thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I think if there's any question, I'll suggest that we keep it, because the next item, the budget, we'll still have staff there, and we'll combine all the questions when we go through that item. Thank you for your understanding. And the budget item, let's see, an update from Trustee Hart first, and then Associate Director, you first.
No, I know I'm up there, but I think this was more the budget working group, right?
No, the
Some
budget,
discussions?
the budget.
The upcoming dates? Okay, so budget staff have visited SEAC across the different stages of the budget this winter. And so upcoming, what's left in the budget process, we heard delegations today. We have an update meeting tomorrow, which is less formal, which is all last week were the budget town halls and whatchamacallit? Sorry, trustee meetings, or sorry, community meetings regarding the budget. So staff came with some options to balance the budget with what's remaining of our flexible portion of the budget for the coming fall. There are some positive updates in that. I'll let Louise take that one, especially around some special education pieces. I think the biggest change in terms of options to balance is that most of the things that staff are looking at is our central pieces, looking at efficiencies and reduction in departmental budgets as opposed to staffing based. So the last year's proposal to the ministry to take chunks of money from different programs in order to make the deficit repayment plan. Staff have actually not tabled any of those or is not suggesting any of those. So if you recall, one of those program areas was special education, because that's an area where we take extra money when we have it and spend it on special education. So that reduction has not been proposed for the coming year by staff. So most of them are central pieces. And then, as I said, last week was town halls and consultation. Tomorrow we have a meeting where it's just going to be further discussion. So staff are going to summarize the consultations that came in through the town hall and the ward meetings, and other feedback that's come in from CACs or advisory committees and then there'll be less formal discussion amongst trustees about some of the options. I think a couple of trustees are bringing motions forward. And then we don't have the committee vote to recommend a budget to the board happens on June 20th. And then there's a special board meeting on June 22nd. So we do have to have a budget that is sent to the ministry before the end of June. So, Louise, if you wanted to give an update on the some of the special education funding.
Yeah, thank you very much through you, Chair and Vice Chair. Just to be sharing information regarding the special education grant and our conversation with the ministry. So one component of the special education grant is called SIP, or Special Incident Portion. And the ministry had allocated us $4.8 million. So in a conference call with them, I had indicated that I was very confident in partnering with staff that we would be able to increase the number of claims that we were putting forward to the ministry and to request an extension from them, so that we would be able to have those claims submitted and reviewed. And they agreed that we would likely be more reflective of a higher level of grant. And so we are being given to August 31st, and they have estimated our submission to be to $10 million. So that is certainly good news for the Board of Trustees who have the difficult decision on how to pass a balanced budget facing a $61 million deficit. for next year, and part of the board's consideration is using proceeds of disposition to get to balance. And just a reminder that SIP claims are retrospective. They are submitted on behalf of the board to the ministry for staffing that has been already put into place for our students. So it is certainly incumbent upon us to put in those claims to be receiving the funding for the staffing and the various supports that we put in place for the success of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ars and Associate Director Sirorsky, and thanks. That's the good news. I mean, I don't see people kind of clapping here. I mean, we should clap. When it's good, some money coming from
$1.2 million.
good news.
Nora's committed to helping me write a letter, which we still have to write regarding SIP, because it's better, but it's still funding at $27,000 a student.
Yes, it's already something. It's a positive.
It is.
Yeah. Bill, you said thank you, but.
Thank you, but, yes.
Okay. Any question for the two, updates from leadership report and this section of, the budget from trustees? If no, I think that is Richard, right? No.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I think that fits in most likely right at this point. As we talked about working groups and the importance of SEAC membership and contributing to the working groups, the budget working group is very, very light. It's been myself and Elizabeth for a good period of time. Melissa and Nora have contributed, as well as Jean-Paul, in the most recent discussions. Jean-Paul and I talked last night. And I think the three main things that came out of that discussion was, number one, is understanding what is within the special education budget. And I know Louise has provided us a bunch of information on that. And then understanding what elements of the special education budget are flexible, using the words Louise just used a minute ago. And then what are the proposed changes by the board, by staff, and their respective impact on students with special needs, including ensuring the board fully meets its legal mandate with regards to students with special needs and the delivery of those services. So that item number 3 is what we, as SEAC, I think, most importantly need to understand, is if you are going to make changes and there are going to be cuts, then what do each of those look like as a line item? What is the budget impact? What is the impact on students, the delivery of services, et cetera? Because I think we all understand that staff and their team have spent tens of thousands of hours, most likely going through the budget, making deliberations, if you combine everybody's time. And SEAC is a much smaller group with much less time. So we need to have those nuggets in front of us and know what to pick and what not to pick. And I think Melissa brought it forward here, but I know Louise was talking about it earlier tonight and maybe can touch a little more on it, is basically, apparently there was, and John Paul heard this at FBEC, about 5,500 special education students. There's a decrease in the number of special ed students, which represents, like, numbers in front of me say 12% of the special education population. Like, how does this happen all of a sudden, and we don't even know about it as SEAC? And kind of, I don't even know what to ask as a question, because I'm overwhelmed by the magnitude of this and what it could mean. So I don't know who wants to speak to this. If Jean-Paul, you want to talk about your experience when you went to FBEC and heard this, or if Louise wants to respond. Thank you.
I think that is to add to what Richard just said about the working group, because as you know, as Trustee Arts just mentioned, there's an FBEC meeting tomorrow, which I will be attending, and to share our concern. But we are going, as a SEAC, we are going into this meeting without knowing the specific concern. We're going there as of now, just to tell the board that we are very concerned with what we're seeing here, the reduction. And we don't know, the consequences of some of these reductions to the access to special education services by our most vulnerable students. And that's exactly why one of the questions that's we asked when we saw the summary that Associate Director Sirosky, shared with us, was to ask, what are some of the ratios that we can call as a standard, to kind of understand some of this reduction, from. I mean, that is, what is the ratio, special education, a teacher to student, and some of these consultant or counselor or worker, to student, how and through the board. And I'm sure that, some of these ratio are established because I have some outdated, from 2015 ratios across the province, but I'm sure that they are updated now. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, to the committee. First of all, our gratitude to the Working Committee for wanting to look at the special education budget and give best advice to the Board of Trustees, who again have a large challenge ahead of them. To be supporting the working group, staff prepared a report and have been. Executive Officer Craig Snyder has been to SEAC repeatedly this year, talking about the budget as well as reductions that were considered and part of budget development. To support the most recent budget working group, staff prepared a report that linked key reports for review that contained a lot of data about special education. And to Ms. Green's comment, there has been a reduction in the number of students who have been noted as having IEPs and receiving supports and services, non-formally identified students, and no IEP. The enrollment of the board has also been in decline. As a correlation that is likely, the board has initiated a practice, particularly for primary students, not to initially generate an IEP, but instead to be working with the team at the school to talk about a student and to be creating an individual learning plan that would be probably more detailed than an IEP, with the hope that with the interventions and the program considerations for that student put in place, that any concerns that were noted by the educators would be watched and hopefully dissipate, so that a student wouldn't be placed on an IEP. And it is likely that that practice is also affecting the number of IEPs being reduced. If that was not brought to SEAC, I extend my apologies, and certainly going forward we'll be making sure that any program changes such as that will be brought for your awareness and advice coming back for policy development and practice. And to your question, Chair, in that report, I itemized some of the proposed reductions to get to balance, which included pandemic recovery funding. So just for SEAC's awareness, because that funding is no longer there, the staffing is no longer there. So that included 35 child and youth workers. For professional support services, funded by COVID funds, 16 social workers and 15 child and youth counselors. And then lastly, to support getting to balance, or getting to compliance, sorry, I'm using balance is not the right word, compliance. There are 3 central reductions, $1.5 million in the restructuring of consultants and coordinators, and System Superintendent Palmer spoke of that at our last meeting. There's a $2.6 million reduction in elementary certs, which is 23.5 FTE, and $1.5 million in reduction in secondary certs at 13.5 FTE. Those reductions would be commensurate with the reduction in the number of students that are receiving supports, but would be cascaded throughout the system. Over our 540 schools. So getting a ratio for you, Chair, is a bit problematic because the ratio would be so very minuscule. But that's why I put the FTE in there for you, and you can just be, that would probably be 0.1, 0.2 spread over, a large number of schools. So that would be representing one period, a 0.1 would be representing one period for a school timetable, as an example.
Thank you, Louise. Is it possible to have, I'm sure that you kind of developed an option paper, option analysis. And I think that is, in order to avoid all this, having, you said that is 0.1, 0.2. If you have a 0.1 that will be looking after in a learning network, more than one school. I mean, it's not effective. I understand that we're looking into efficiency here. And what about effectiveness? And, I think earlier Richard was talking about the outcome. How can we make sure that, and those are some of the, why we are concerned with
understandably
reading some of these.
So just a couple of points to be sharing, Chair. As I said, the board is looking at a $61 million deficit going into next year. This past year, the board passed a deficit budget as they were allowed to engage in at 1.3%. And when that happens, the board has to develop a deficit recovery plan that is then monitored by the Ministry of Education so that the board makes the necessary structural changes so that they are operating eventually through time within the means of funding. So the board is on paper operating $67 million outside of the special education grant. And the special education grant through the deficit recovery plan was targeted at reducing special education investment by $10 million. So $5 million this year and $5 million next year.
Yeah, thank you, Luis. I think that is because, we're going to the board tomorrow to tell the board that we are really concerned about, the reductions that we're having on special education, especially because we don't know what are the consequences. And yes, I think that I'll let you, speak before I make a suggestion of what I want to make, a suggestion of, a recommendation or a motion that we speak to tomorrow when I attend the meeting. Yes, Melissa, please, a very quick and
Yep, sorry, just
after that, Nora.
first, just a very quick factual yes/no question. So the proposed March cut of $5 million to special education plan budget, that's still happening, and another $5 million next year, if I'm understanding?
That's correct.
Okay, so the next thing is, and we don't have time for it today, but I really would like to find a way that we can have more rich information about, first of all, the existence of the 5,500 student decrease, which we only found out about ourselves. So moving on from that, though, what are the implications of that? So I think I'm hearing you say that some of this could arise from having fewer IEPs, because those students who might have previously received an IEP, especially in the primary years, are now going to receive an ILP. But, and this is a more fulsome discussion, but I think what I'm hearing is a little bit of a shell game. So if we have fewer special education students that have IEPs, we have now lost funding for the various staff that might support them. But those students are now in a different bucket called ILPs. And I'm wondering if that means that we've lost the support. So that's really oversimplified. These are deeper conversations, but I would hope that they could be happening in other venues.
Yes, for the interest of time, I'll let Nora speak. Sorry.
Is anybody actually moderating the online as well?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll let Nora speak, but I've had my question, my hand up as well, and there's, I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. I think that is, sorry.
That's okay. I'll just wait for it.
Yeah, no, I'm just, so my quick question is, it'll be more important than ever before to track what happens to the kids. So kids who are excluded, kids on modified day, kids on refusal to admit, because when I look at the staffing, the regular class is looking a little sparse, just saying. So I think it's going to be more important than ever before. Trustees are fully aware of the fact that people may not be meeting their duty to accommodate students to a public education.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead online, please.
Thank you. This is Isabella from LC4. So my question has to do with those 5,000 students, but more importantly, the parents are supposed to be involved in this process of deciding whether their kids will be placed or not on IEP. And it's my understanding that most parents actually quite often want IEPs as opposed to not. Did they actually have any say in that process? I'm just asking because it's quite a significant number of students. That's why.
If I may, let us, I want to make a suggestion here, because as, Melissa rightly said, we really need to have that conversation here. The ILP versus IEP, we need to know exactly, what is, because I hope it's not a way to push, away some children to this new bucket that we were creating. I think that is not now. We probably need to schedule that, have it and have a fulsome discussion. What I would suggest here is that someone, I think, I'm looking at Richard, put a motion on the floor so that we agree that what I will be speaking to tomorrow is that SEAC is really concerned about the cut because we have no idea about what will be the implications of this reduction. And for that, we asking the board to consider looking at cutting something, reducing something else and kind of sheltering the special education budget as much as they can. Because we understand that, there's a shortfall, a big shortfall. That is basically what, we want us, when I was, telling them this tomorrow, that is exactly what, the way that, how we feel. Yes, Richard.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure if we actually need a motion or if, I think from the feedback that you've got, I think you've heard the concerns that everybody has raised that they would like you to bring forward as the chair. So unless somebody was opposed to that and had comments to the contrary, is there a need for a process-wise for a motion, or can we just have you proceed?
If we all agree?
Yeah, if it could be worded, even as simple as SEAC recommends and statement, then I can bring that tomorrow, and Jean-Paul can delegate to speak to it so that it is included in the feedback that's going to be considered, the total feedback that's going to be considered at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So does anybody have suggestions on the very brief wording? Essentially,
I think as you're drafting, I would start to cover another item, and we'll come back to that to conclude the meeting. I'm looking. Okay. I think that is Richard, is on behalf of the budget working group, is drafting, something that for us to view and kind of make it as a recommendation. And
So I'm also understanding while he's at this that for the coming year and the next process to make it move a bit more efficiently through the fall and the whole winter, that there's more bodies needed on the budget working group. Leanne said on paper there was only Richard and Jean-Paul. So for the coming year, I think it would be helpful if there were more bodies on the budget working group.
In an ad hoc way, I
Ad
recruited
hoc this time.
I recruited Melissa and Nora.
And Chair, may I offer a little point of what I'm hoping is some reassurance? There is a very, very small portion of the special education grant that connects to the number of IEPs. The majority of the special education grant is generated by enrollment, total enrollment for the board. So it really attaching funding to IEP generation is actually going to create more and more IEPs, and that's why it's structured that way. So the ministry doesn't want to incentivize creating an IEP for students within boards.
Okay. In the meantime, let us, the effective practice, update as we're waiting to. Please.
Hey, can you hear me?
It's Kristen. Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, yeah, I'm going to be really quick with this. I sent out a survey yesterday or the day before, I forget, but it's just a bunch of recommendations that we came up with in the Effective Practices Working Group, and we phrased those as questions. We put them into a survey just to gauge how much support there is for these recommendations. We've received a bunch of responses so far. I sent out some comments that we've received so far. I sent it out to the group earlier on. But so far, the feedback is overwhelmingly in support of the recommendations that we have come up with. Now, I know not everybody has had a chance to answer the survey, and I understand that everyone is busy. We do still have it open, so I would love for everybody to, to fill in the survey, and then at the start of the new school year, when we reconvene, we will present the total findings. And if anybody has any technical issues or accessibility issues when it comes to completing the survey, please let me know, and we will find a way for you to be able to do that. So, yeah, that is my update. Short and sweet.
If I may make a suggestion here, please, it is a great idea to interact with members, in our working group, interacting with members. We have, in our communication or protocol, please do this when you're sending all the survey. We need some to archive all the great work that we're doing. Do it through the liaison, please. You send it to the liaison, and in this case, Leanne will take care of it and make sure that it is archived into the material. And that will be our corporate memory. Thank you very much. Yes.
So I just wanted to add, thank you to everybody. We've already had, as of last check, at least 10 people respond. We had a number of comments. As mentioned, Kirsten circulated some of them earlier. I wonder if Leanne might put them up on the screen, or it's too late, people are too tired. We'll figure out some way to share all of this information later. But yes, there was quite a bit of very overwhelming yeses to the recommendations. There was a handful of little bit scattering of unsures, which is helpful for us because that means, we need to clarify this. So this is an ongoing process, like continuous improvement, just like the nature of life. This will continue into the fall and through next year. In the meantime, if anybody ever has any suggestions for this or any other group and wants to join this or any other group, or just provide, stray tidbits of recommendations, it's always welcome. So we'll figure out how to share this going forward. It seems like this format of the survey, it worked at least for this type of thing. So we'll keep trying to figure out how to engage and continuously improve. So thanks everyone for participating, if you have already, and please do in the future.
And please, through Leanne, so that it is documented, through Leanne. Okay, thank you. And I think this is the last meeting. Richard is still working on the recommendation for tomorrow. This is the last meeting, and I think I would suggest that all the members on online to come to the the video to say hi, so that we can see at least virtually, because there are some members that we didn't have a chance to speak often. Starting from the upper left, the person already has his or her hand up. Can you please say hi?
Hi. I think, Jean-Paul, you may be speaking about me. It's Beth Dangerfield here.
Yeah. Go.
Yeah, wow, I'm there twice. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I just have a quick question, and it's come up in the chat again. I think Isabella has raised it too. I'm wondering, Louise, can you just clarify? You said the province doesn't want to incentivize IEPs, and I'm sorry, I don't understand. What that.
Yes,
that means.
please. I don't want to be rude. I mean, that is.
But you know what, Jean-Paul, I've been on here for 45 minutes
please.
extra.
We said that.
And this is actually it's really horrifying, the comment, but I think I might misunderstand it. So I wonder if, and zero disrespect, but I'm really trying to understand, like, this is it. I don't know what that means. And I think I'm not the only one. I've waited on here now for 44 minutes past 9 o'clock. So can we just get a quick answer, Louise, just to clarify that comment? And Jean-Paul, I appreciate your efforts to really keep this on track. I really do. And I know that it's difficult, but this is really, really important.
Okay, and before closing, say hi for the end of the school year before closing. Louisa will get back to hi, and after Louise will kind of respond to that, you pass on the baton to the next on your screen.
Thank you, and through the chair to Beth. So Beth, it's about funding from the ministry level. So the ministry provides funding based on the enrollment of boards, not the number of IEPs that are generated by the board. If the ministry gave funding based on the number of IEPs by the board, the risk would be that IEPs may be created for funding. So the assumption is made that based on the total enrollment of the board, there will be a percentage of students who require support and services, and the board should not feel that they need to create an IEP to get that funding. Does that make sense? So the assumption is based on X number of students, a proportion of those students are going to require supports and services, and the funding is based on that enrollment count.
Okay, thank you, Luis. I think, as you said, we'll probably have a fulsome discussion on this. Are you done? Yes, Jordan.
Yeah, I just want to be clear because again, this is quite the bombshell, as it was phrased in the chat, to drop on us. How long has this been the case? I just want to be clear that we're saying that there's an actual process being undertaken by which IEPs are are not being raised because they may be utilized as a means of grabbing for cash?
So if I may clarify, what I'm going to suggest through the chair is that we actually have a session on the special education grant. And we can go into all of the different modalities that the ministry provides funding for boards. And there are great many things that we can be sharing and clarifying. It's, I think that would be a better approach through you, Chair.
Yeah, I would further clarify, the ministry is not collecting, and to my knowledge, never has collected information about our individual IEPs. They give us an amount of money that is a fraction of our enrollment, total enrollment-based funding for special education. And then there's a couple of special grants we can apply for, like the C grant and the SIP. But they are not asking us how many IEPs we have and then giving us money based on that. So more IEPs in our system does not get us more money. So whether students have an IEP designated at the school level is not impacting the amount of money that the board gets to deliver special education. The only place where an individual student actually is being registered with the ministry is if you make an equipment claim or a SIP claim, that kind of direct reimbursement funding. So they're not asking us. They should be, I believe they should be collecting the data, especially for, we know that their data, what they, some of the areas that they prioritize in funding as diagnosis change, as recognition changes, that the ministry's assessments of what special education needs are hasn't really kept pace with what's actually happening with students, but they're not collecting that kind of data from us and then funding based on that.
And I think that let us have a fulsome discussion in the fall around, the budget and trying to clarify or remove the anxiety that we have about the consequences from the court and from the reduction. I'm looking at, Associate Director Sirorsky. Yes,
Yes,
you don't.
thank you. We will absolutely do that session.
I have the motion available.
Yes,
Chair?
yes, Richard, go ahead, please. We were waiting for you as we.
Okay, I'll read the motion now. SEAC recommends that the board provide SEAC with a detailed explanation of all planned cuts to the special education budget and the impact of those cuts on the delivery of special education services and the implication for students with special education needs, and hence, how they will instead support these students and meet their legal obligations.
Any comment? Let us bring it to the floor first. Who is bringing, Richard, you bring it to the floor, right?
I will bring the motion to the floor.
No, Melissa Segon. Okay. Any comment, please? If it's correct, let us go to the vote and tomorrow. Any comment? Leo? Leo, go ahead, please.
No, thank you, Chair. There were a few questions about the funding and IEPs and all that thing. Well, one thing that I wanted to bring up here, which I think comes up a lot, is that, and I might be wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it, the IEPs, they make the board have a legal obligation.
Yes, please. If it's not,
that's the main difference.
You can come back to this. We have a motion on the floor. We can come back to this right after this. Any comment?
Okay, sorry, Chair.
Yes, no, it's fine. I think this. Any comment for this, the motion? Can I assume that we're all okay with the way that it's wording? Thank you, Richard. Let us move into to the vote. All in favor? I mean, this. Leanne, can you please help monitoring? Is it everyone anonymously? Because that's
I'm
what,
just counting, yeah,
anonymously, yeah? Okay,
yes.
anonymously. Okay, thank you, Richard. No, I think that is, again, I'm so sorry to, to keep, we had a length, very, long meeting today. You can understand that is for a reason, because the budget, if we don't have the money, we don't have the staff motivation to help, and that's why it's for all of us. I'm looking at the staff, sorry that we have this, and for the members, that's what brings us together. I mean, making sure that all the vulnerable students, most vulnerable students in the system have, access to, the services that they need to meet the full potential as required under the Education Act. Thanks, for the commitment of the trustee arts. I think that is really special. I mean, we have a special trustee this year, special in a good sense, honestly, to be helping us, guiding us. Thank you for, and that is, we're at the end of the school year, and we kind of, we're recessing throughout the summer. I was suggesting that some of the colleagues who are online, that they show the face, that we can see them at least virtually, but it's too late now. Everyone, any last comment before we move? I don't know if, Associate Director Sirosky, anything to say before the recess? No? Anything to say? That is before recessing for the summer?
Awesome work. And thank you very much for your time, your contribution, and for collaborating with staff. And we wish everyone and their children, our students, the very, very best, healthy, happy summer.
Okay. Any last comment for any member before we adjourn? Thank you.
Everybody had a great summer.
Thank you for staying so long. I'm sorry, and it's for the reason that I already stated. And a motion to adjourn, Nora? A motion to adjourn? Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Melissa. Seconded. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Happy summer. Thanks, Leanne, for all the great work.
Thank you. Have a great summer.
You too. Thank you.
Stay well, everybody.